Well, across the seas now, 3 terrorist attacks, 3 different nations, all happening within just a few hours of each other. At least 39 people killed in an attack at a beach resort in Tunisia when a gunman pulled an assault rifle out of his umbrella and then opened fire. 27 people killed in Kuwait when a homicide bomber attacked a mosque during midday prayers. And at a U.S.-owned company in southern France, a truck ramming through the front gate, triggering an explosion. One person also beheaded. Joining us now live with the very latest on the story, John Huddy, who's standing by in our Middle East Bureau with more. John?
Yeah, well, Uma, and you touched upon this in the lead, 3 attacks in a time span of 4 hours, close to 70 people at this point killed. And I say at this point because we've seen those death toll numbers rise since these attacks and over the past 24 hours. As for the attack in Tunisia, we know at this point that 15 of the 39 people killed were British. That, according to British officials, the most significant attack on British people since the London bombings back in 2005. That said, today, as you can imagine, people were packing in the buses, heading to the airport, streaming out, leaving in droves from Tunisia because of the massacre yesterday, also being called a bloodbath, when a gunman attacked a beach full of sunbathers, people relaxing, spraying it with automatic gunfire, mowing those people down before then going to a hotel and continuing the attack there. Tunisian officials say the gunman, a 24-year-old engineering student, was killed in a shootout with police. They believe that he was an Islamic radical with possible ties to ISIS. This is the second major attack in Tunisia this year. You may remember back in March, Islamic militants killed 22 people outside of a museum. It was at the time the worst terror attack in the country's history, that is, until yesterday. The bloodbath in Tunisia was, just as said, one of 3 attacks yesterday. In Kuwait, at least 27 people at this point were killed after a suicide attack inside a Shiite mosque. ISIS claimed responsibility for that attack. And then, of course, in France, you had the attack there. A 35-year-old man who rammed his vehicle into gas canisters at a U.S.-owned gas company, causing an explosion, igniting an explosion, and then they found the head of his beheaded boss that was hanging from a railing there. And again, this guy was on a French terror watch list. So all of these 3 attacks connected to a message, it's believed, connected to a message released by ISIS calling on its followers to continue the attacks this month, the holy month of Ramadan for Muslims. It's a concern among officials everywhere, particularly among U.S. officials, of course, Uma, with the 4th of July right around the corner.
Indeed. All right, John Huddy reporting from our Middle East Bureau. Now, the group claiming responsibility for the Tunisia attack is a splinter group of ISIS, calling themselves Ansar al-Sharia. The group first coming together in a Tunisian prison back in 2006 by 21 Islamic prisoners. It reportedly boasts some 30,000 to 40,000 followers, mostly young people, and it's believed that several thousand fought in Syria and up to 500 have returned to Tunisia. They've been linked to at least 5 attacks in Tunisia over the last 3 years, including a suicide bombing in the same town back in 2013. And the bomber was the only one killed in that attack. In that French terror attack, 3 people have now been detained, including the driver of the truck that plowed into a chemical warehouse, who also hung the severed head of his former employer on the factory gate, which is a tactic often used by ISIS. No group claiming responsibility for that attack, but the suspect is known to have radical Islamic ties, and it comes just days after the Islamic State urged its followers to wage attacks. Joining us now, Dr. Jasser, who is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, a former lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy, and author of the book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam. Welcome, Dr. Jasser. Great to have you here on the show again.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Uma.
You know, there are reports that American intelligence agencies are now reassessing their characterization of ISIS as simply a regional threat following these 3 terror attacks, which some believe may have been directed or at least influenced by ISIS. Why is ISIS now attacking during Ramadan? Certainly it represents a perversion of Islam's most holy periods.
Oh, and and it's about time that they start to look back and pull the lens back and see what's going on. ISIS is far more inspirational than it is organizational. They throw sparks and want it to light up any fuel wherever possible, and that fuel is Islamo-patriotism, Islamo-nationalism for any Islamic state, and that what they fear the most are Muslims that are more God-centered. In this month of Ramadan, we're introspective, we're looking within for atonement, but then there's these global movements of hundreds of millions of Muslims that are part of Islamism, if you will, and ISIS pulls from that pool because they look at less at our religion as God-centered but more ego, supremacist. That's what they're banking on for theocracy, to fuel the theocratic movements against. And unfortunately, Muslims that are westernized, modernized, are still really under anesthesia or not really supported by the West, as we unfortunately are appeasing the two sides of the Islamist scenario, whether it be the Saudi or the Khomeinists in Iran.
Well, yesterday's triple attack is being billed as Bloody Friday by ISIS sympathizers on social media. Even if these atrocities were carried out by so-called lone wolves in the name of ISIS, it illustrates the terror group's efforts to rapidly radicalize followers via social media, and that it happened just days before the first anniversary of ISIL's declaration of a caliphate in the territory it now controls.
Absolutely, and until we begin in the West to understand that this is our whack-a-mole program's not going to work, the old Al-Qaeda paradigm of top-down organizational networks, if you will, versus bottom-up grassroots inspirational organizations that want something to stick. They're really low-yield but very hard to anticipate type of attacks. Until we get that, we are not going to be able to prevent this. I'm afraid there's going to be a lot more. They use inspirational months like Ramadan and other things that get our religious fervor to have Muslims act. And unfortunately, we have no strategy to counter the ideology. We only look at terror as a violence problem and a network problem.
Well, the fact that the terrorists are targeting Tunisia again is significant, that it strikes a big blow to that country's tourism business, which attracts, of course, many Western tourists, right?
Uma, I can't tell you how important that point is, because they look upon the world divided into two regions. One is Dar al-Harb, the land of war, which is in the West, be it France or America. The other is Dar al-Islam, or the land of Islam. Tunisia is the biggest existential threat within the Muslim consciousness, because 6 months ago you just had a secular party win a majority of the vote against the Islamists of An-Nahda, so that theocratic mindset is losing in the polls, so they want to destroy the economy, which is tourism of Tunisia, destroy the connection to Western liberty, and thus allow the defeat and the recurrence of Islamism. And that's why so many ISIS recruits are coming from Tunisia. It's more of an open society. They can infiltrate the media more, but also the secularists are weak, and we're not supporting them at all.
I know that you and many others are so frustrated by what still appears to be a lack of urgency on a global call to action against ISIS, not only from the West, but also from the Muslim community as well, since it's clear that ISIS is spreading well beyond Iraq and Syria and maybe setting its sights on a big hit here in the U.S. And also, if you take a look at the public opinion polls, our latest Fox News poll shows growing dissatisfaction with President Obama on his handling of the extremists. If you take a look at those numbers that we're putting up on the screen right now, is Barack Obama too soft on Islamic extremists? You can see that 58% of those we polled say yes. Why do you think the strategies so far are so short-sighted?
Because we're too busy worrying about partisan politics. The left wants to use Muslim issue as a minority issue, and we don't look at it to see that the world is where the world was in the 30s, and the threat today is really global Islamism, be it the Shiite version of Assad and Khomeini. As Assad uses chemical weapons, we stand by and let them commit genocide, or the Sunni Islamist radicals of the Wahhabi Salafist mentality that's spreading through ISIS. So, and unfortunately, as the polls you just showed demonstrate, America's smart. We get it. Unfortunately, there's not been a sense of urgency where the Iraq war narrative has been falsely portrayed. ISIS is not a byproduct of that. It's a byproduct of a failed Syria policy, failed anti-Assad policy that's doing that, and also a lack of engagement of reform-minded Muslims. And really, what's at stake for us? American Muslims need to understand that unless we wake up to leave a legacy that we promote liberty, the world is going to see Islam as a threat of evil rather than the blessings that we try to see in this month of Ramadan.
Dr. Jasser, always great to have your insights. Thank you so much for joining us today.